Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to the same old Arsenal podcast, the Catharsis episode. My name's Chris Howard, Suburban Gooner Chris, and I am joined in duet today. We might get JJ, the famous JJ, joining us, but we've thrown him a little bit of a curveball by telling him we wanted to go a little bit earlier because, James, frankly, you and I just wanted to rip the Band-Aid off and get this over and done with, didn't we?
Yeah, I think we did, Chris. You know what, yesterday was an interesting one for me because I was going to Ascot, the racecourse, which, if anyone in the UK knows, really famous racecourse, can be a really nice day out. It can also be quite a dreadful day out if you happen to lose quite a lot of money. And I was like, okay, so I know the risks going into this. Arsenal are going to be on the telly. I'm going to be able to watch the game, which is great. I'm also going to be betting on horses. So either I could win some money and Arsenal win, fantastic day, or I could lose all my money and Arsenal lose, which would be a dreadful day. And I'm sorry to say, Chris, Arsenal lost, as we all know, and we're going to get into, and I also lost all 7 of the races. So yeah, it wasn't the best of days for me, but I'm in a weird way looking forward to talking it through with you and hopefully making myself feel a little bit better about the game coming up on Wednesday night against Inter.
Well, I'm sad to say to you, James, probably based on how I'm feeling at the end of this hour or so, we might even cut it short, depending if we're at the verge of slitting each other's wrists. I'm not going to make it feel any better because I do not feel great about what happened yesterday. It would be remiss of me to continue the rest of this podcast, however, without just giving a little of a tip of the cap to Ruth Beck, who sponsors this podcast, and she has some fantastic artwork that she does. Check her out on Ruth Beck Art on Etsy. She's got a fantastic shop. There's loads of stuff, and we're getting in. I can't believe I'm saying this, but we're getting close towards Christmas season. I'm seeing it all in the supermarkets, the Christmas cards, the Christmas banners, and all that sort of stuff. And what we'll do is we'll get Ruth to send us some of her fabulous artwork that she puts together, so that we can share it with you guys, and you can hopefully partake in some of the delights that her artwork can deliver, because frankly, yesterday's performance delivered absolutely zero delights. And I think, mate, we have to kick off with the starting lineup, because I was a bit baffled, really, if I'm honest with you. I get that Ben White is not fit, so I totally understand it. He had one training session. Arteta said it afterwards. He wasn't ready to start. Fine. But Jurriën Timber played 45 minutes in midweek. He's getting back to good health, and Jurriën Timber was available. So you can start Jurriën Timber at right back. You don't need to start Thomas Partey at right back. And as much as I think Thomas Partey has actually been quite good of late, I just don't think this particular project, this particular test run works. So can I get some views from you on that and the lineup in general? Because it gave me sort of weird spidey sense tinglings of a bad afternoon. Did you have the same feelings from your top hat and tails in Ascot or whatever it was you were dressed up, donned to the hilt on?
Definitely not top hat and tails, mate. I'm not that posh, unfortunately. Just a classic suit trousers, open collar shirt. That's about as fancy as it gets for me. But I shared that exact same sentiment with regards to the lineup. And the only kind of logic I can get behind it is that Partey did incredibly well against Liverpool at right back, albeit out of position. But I just didn't want to see him there again, purely because at the moment, even at right back, I still feel like he's in the top 3 of our performers, if not top performer at the minute. I think he's doing really, really well. And to see him kind of wasting his ability at right back when we clearly need his creativity and line breaking passes in midfield just feels like we're utilizing him in entirely the wrong way. And ultimately, I've liked this 4-4-2 system, and I like how sturdy it's been going away to Spurs when we saw Partey and Jorginho in midfield and we looked really solid, going away to City where defensively it was fantastic and was really unfortunate not to get the win in that game. But I think, like a lot of other people have said, it's run its course now, and I don't like that we're kind of obliterating an entire system that we've had so much success on for the sake of trying to accommodate a lack of Martin Odegaard. Like, we know how important he is to this Arsenal team, but you just have to go back a couple of days to the game against Preston, where albeit we played with very different players and we rotated very heavily. But look how fluid the team was that day, because we were playing a system that we are used to and accustomed to. And we've got the players that kind of fit the bill. And I didn't understand why we need to play Partey at right back. Okay, the option is you play Timber at right back because Ben White's still coming back from injury. Timber, for me, as good as he is at left back, and I think he's very solid there, you've got two fullbacks that aren't going to overlap. And just look at Timber's performance against Paris Saint-Germain in the Champions League when he played at right back. He can be phenomenal there. So I'd have played him there. I know a lot of people won't like to hear it, but I would have played Zinchenko on the other side, just because it's more balanced, or even play Kivior on that side, just because you're having a bit more of a balanced team, and then Timber can get forward on that right-hand side of the pitch or invert or whatever it is he's going to do best in that role. But it just didn't feel balanced, and there was a real lack of creativity. And after Nwaneri's performance against Preston, I would have played a midfield three of either Rice, Marino, and Nwaneri, or Partey, Rice, and Nwaneri. I just think we need that attacking spark in there. And you can even play your strongest on paper front three in Martinelli, Havertz, and Bukayo Saka. So yeah, it feels like we're kind of sacrificing our identity when we go into these games for the sake of being a bit more solid. But we're conceding goals, pretty much every game at the minute, and you can't really. We'll go into the goal they scored, I'm sure, but it's the sort of goal that it's really hard to defend against because it's just such a fantastic goal. But we just never look like scoring, and that's a big problem for me. And I think that lineup just played into Newcastle's hands.
Yeah, it absolutely did. So a few things to unpick there. And there's somebody in the chat has said, let's answer this question quickly, because if you want to get your questions in, we'll try and get through some of them at the end. So please pop your comments in the chat. FUT, I think it's Foot Gaming, said, are we all in agreement? Or it says arrest, but I think that means Arteta should leave. It's been 5 years. 100% no. I think you're barking up the wrong tree, mate, personally. What Arteta has done in the 5 years that he's been in charge of Arsenal has been phenomenal. And the team that we are now, compared to the team that we were when he took over, it's night and day. So, James, I don't know, I suspect you probably echo my sentiment there, but there's no way that I think that Arteta, we should be thinking about him leaving. Even Darren Nichols has said, after yesterday's result, I want Arteta out. Playing Partey at fullback when you have defenders on the bench is disgraceful. Football is too slow and he's tactically clueless. Darren, with all due respect, Mr. Nichols, I categorically disagree with you. I think there's a lot of, I'm feeling raw right now after that, and we're going to get into it. We're going to get into the duels that we didn't win. We're going to get into the mentality. We're going to get into individual performances with the likes of Trossard. We just talked about Partey. We're going to talk about the tactical side. And yes, I do think Arteta got it wrong yesterday, and I think he needs to hold his hands up. However, calling for his head at this stage, I just think is mental. This guy is a brilliant manager. And one of the good things about Arteta, and James, I will get you to just jump in with some thoughts on that before we can jump back to the tactical and the starting lineup, because I want to talk about that. One of the good things about Arteta, I think, is that he learns, and he learns quickly. I have the hope that he will look at this result yesterday and he will say, nope, not good enough. This is what didn't work. And I think there are certain experiments that we won't see again. I think Leandro Trossard is not long for the team. I think he'll probably be sat down picking some bench time sooner rather than later. And I don't think we're going to see Partey in at right back for much longer because of players coming back. But James, can we quickly get your thoughts on Foot Gaming's quick comment, which was Arteta leaving, and then I want to go back to the tactical setup.
So I think with all due respect, I do think it's a little bit hyperbolic to say that he should be leaving for the sake of a couple of bad results. Obviously, Bournemouth, really frustrating. And then yesterday, really frustrating as well. Sandwiched in between there was obviously the win against Shakhtar, which again wasn't great. We had the win against Liverpool, the draw against Liverpool. I wish it was a win, but it felt like we could have won that game because we were so good and we played some brilliant football in that first half. I just think he needs to be slightly braver in some of his decision making. We don't need to be playing this 4-4-2 formation against, kind of here, there, and everywhere opposition. We can just be a bit braver, and we've got players that can do it. And look, the whole reason we let go with Fabio Vieira and Emile Smith-Rowe in the summer was because we've got this prodigy coming through, and Ethan Nwaneri, and he got 40-ish minutes off the bench yesterday. I'd much rather have seen him start, and he just looks so brave. I feel so safe with him in possession. I think he would offer more to this Arsenal team than Trossard at the minute. And obviously, you can't be pinning your hopes on a 17-year-old. There's a very good chance he could play that game and be anonymous for the entirety of it. And you've just kind of got to accept that when you're betting a 17-year-old in. But at the same time, when I'm looking at what Trossard's doing, I just can't help but feel he can't be any worse than that. So I would be inclined to do that. And I think the Inter Milan game is really huge, and he definitely has to learn from his mistakes in that game and just play a team that is more balanced. Maybe sacrifice a bit of defensive stability, bring Zinchenko in because we know he can play a pass, bring Ranieri into midfield. Obviously, the big player that we're missing is Calafiori, because if Calafiori's fit, you can play Calafiori, Gabriel Saliba, and Ben White and Urian Timber on the other side. And you've got a really good settled back four. When he's back after the international break, I think we'll be in a much better position. But right now, it's just a bit passive, Chris, and that's the thing that I'm struggling with at the minute, is that we know we're capable of playing such good football, but at the minute we're not even close to it.
Nope, absolutely not. So let's talk. I do want to go back to what you were saying about Partey and also the Zinchenko thing. I mean, Zinchenko came on, and let's be honest, he was terrible when he came on, misplacing passes. There was one counter attack which he basically just passed the ball 5 yards in front of him to a Newcastle player, and then they broke us. They countered on us. So I don't think that Zinchenko was the answer, and I'm not going to get a lot of popularity here in the comments, but I do think we should have considered Kivior. I think that Kivior came on against Liverpool, and I think he did all right. I mean, he had that poor showing against Bournemouth, granted. But again, coming into a difficult situation, these things happen. I think against Preston, he seemed to do all right. He seemed to have a good performance, 2 assists. And for footballers, a lot of it is getting back to the kind of the mechanism. It's getting back to the automatisms of playing more regularly playing football more regularly. If you don't play football very much, if you're starting because you're not getting a feel and you're not getting onto that pitch for first team football, then it's going to take you a while to get up to speed. Last season, Kivior came in for a run of a half a dozen or maybe 10 games, played at left back, looked really good. And I looked at that game yesterday and I thought, why not play Timber at right back? Kivior comes in at left back. We know what Newcastle are going to do. They're going to try and emphasise through Anthony Gordon, Isak through the middle. One of the things that Kivior is good at, what's he good at? He's not the fastest, but he's got a bit of pace, so he could probably match up Gordon with there. He's a centre half, so he's used to doing duelling and one-on-one battles with centre forwards, so he could match up with Gordon on that. And he's not bad in terms of his distribution. So for me, I would have absolutely have played Kivior at left back, and I would have played the Timber at right back. You slot Thomas Partey into midfield. And this is exactly what you were saying, James, because then we get that progressive passing. We get that line-breaking passing. We get Thomas Partey also has won a lot of duels this season already. I think he's one of the leading duel monsters in our team. But it felt to me like Arteta set up a team which was like, last year, Newcastle came at us and they were physical. Let's focus in on the physicality that they're going to deliver, and let's try and match them on that. But he completely ceded any kind of creativity whatsoever, and that for me is a big problem. And that's where the calls from Nwaneri coming in, they have some validity. But personally, I just think that if you play Rice as a left eight, you play Partey in that central midfield, and then Marino, maybe Rice at the right eight and Marino on the left, you get a little bit of the duels. You then also get a little bit of that kind of progressive passing from deep from Partey, because he's not able to do as much of it at right back. How did you? So the goal was brilliant. We have to admit, Newcastle, that they got their tactics absolutely spot on. So let's do a minute or two on Newcastle and how you thought they lined up, because I thought it was very clever what Eddie Howe did. What he basically did was he replicated last season, which was, he said, we're going to press it was at least 4 or 5 of our team very high up the pitch when Arsenal have the ball either at Raya's feet or when they're deep within their own half, and we're going to try and force Arsenal to go long. That kind of depressed me that they approached the same tactics and Arteta still didn't have an answer for it, because we saw it from them last season. So you would have thought he'd have taken a look at the game last season and said, right, how do we beat that? How do we counter that? What do you think?
Well, I'm going to go back to one of the points you made in that, mate, about having Partey as the 6, Rice and Marino as the 8. I think just on that, I am going to rarely disagree with you. I don't think that works at all, because that's what we saw against Bournemouth. And for me, it just felt way too stiff and rigid. And you look at those three as a midfield, brilliant in terms of physicality and in terms of winning duels. But in terms of someone playing that killer pass or driving at a defence, we know Rice can do it, but it's not something Marino or Partey really do. And Rice only does it kind of here and there. I think you just need to have a little someone in there to be that creative outlet. Usually it's Martin Odegaard, but I think when you've got Partey and Rice protecting someone like Umanieri, and you've basically got your entire almost strongest team around him as well, I think that's why you can chuck him in and it'd be not a free hit or risk-free, because there's always consequences. But I think you can play him there and he's got enough protection around him to make it work. But going back to your point about Newcastle, I fully expected them to play that way, which is frustrating as well. And for us, I just think we played into their hands. Like, I don't think we needed to play the way that we did. It was just overly negative. We should have played the 4-3-3 that we're so typically used to seeing at Arsenal, and just tried to play our football. But we just played into their hands by playing that negative way, almost accepting from kickoff that we're going to play long balls, that we're going to be up against it, that they're going to be the ones leading the press. Our press was really poor as well yesterday. Like
let's talk about that.
Yeah, we never looked like a side that, we're going to harry down the keeper. Everyone, beyond the midfield just was lacking in intensity. And that's what Odegaard is so good at, bringing players in. You're always seeing him doing this with his arms, trying to rally the troops and get them to press the opposition. We had absolutely none of that yesterday. And it's moments like that make you feel, we're really missing that captain or leader in our team. And I don't feel like Arsenal are a side that are lacking in personalities or leaders, but he is very influential in those moments. But also, Chris, Newcastle just a lot better than us, which I think is worth pointing out. Like, they were good. They were really good. They've had 2 really good results on the bounce now. They've beaten us. They've beaten Chelsea in the Cup. And they're a side that we know can be really, really good. It wasn't so long ago that they were in the Champions League, beating PSG at home, looking, make sides like that look ordinary. So I definitely know they've got quality. They've got a great centre forward in Isaac. Gordon is on fire this season. Them two combining for the goal was just, it was world class. I don't think there's any other term to describe it. That cross was superb. And that header was fantastic as well. So I can't take anything away from them there. They slowed the game down when they had to. They were tactical about it. I definitely think Joel Linton should have been booked. Apart from that, you kind of got to tip your hat to them and say they were the better team, and hold your hands up and recognise that we were just really, really bad. Like, it's the first time in a long time that I've looked at Arsenal and thought, there's just nothing here. Like, it's just really passive. It's just lacking in effort as well, which, I remember when we used to do podcasts in the latter Wenger era, and something we would always find ourselves saying is it's lacking in passion. It's lacking in, enthusiasm. I've never really had to say that at any point under Arteta's tenure, even when it has been bad, there's always been that effort and application. I just felt like that was missing quite a bit yesterday, and I think it'll be a once in a blue moon thing. Like, we saw it against Fulham as well last season. We saw it against West Ham at home last season. It was just no creativity and a lack of application. I don't think this will be a recurring theme. It could just be as simple as a knock-on effect of all the injuries, the really harsh run of games we've had to play. It does feel a little bit like a result like this has been in the post for a while. I was hoping that the Bournemouth game would be our one game at this stage in the season where you can be like, that's just been a disaster. Let's forget about it. Put it in an envelope and seal it away and never open it. It's happened twice now in quite quick succession. So, I am a little bit worried, but I still have complete faith that Arteta will recognise that it's not working and do something about it. But that has to happen on Wednesday.
Yeah, it's interesting because when this seems to happen to us, doesn't it? You just referenced it last Christmas. We tend to have like clusters of games where we just pick up a few defeats or bad results or draws or things like that, and then something happens and it kind of sparks us. We don't tend to have like just a one game and then move on. I actually went online quite a fair bit over the Christmas period, particularly after the Fulham game on New Year's Eve, and basically said, title done, like, we're too far away, you can't. And we went on that mega amazing run, and we went really, really close. I'm kind of in the same boat as well at the moment. It feels like the title is probably, I said it on social media yesterday, I said it on Twitter and Threads, like, title talk now just needs to be parked. Like, we are not anywhere near we're not performing like a team that should be. Neither are Man City, and Liverpool don't look amazing, I will say. They're doing the job, but they've not blown me away. So title talk needs to be parked in the bin, because it does. And I think next weekend, a defeat to Chelsea, that might be the nail in the coffin, because Man City don't lose 2 games in a row. That just doesn't happen. I suspect Liverpool will win. Then you will be talking, Liverpool 9 points clear of us, or 10 points clear of us if we lose to Chelsea, and Man City would be 8 points clear, and that's it. It's done. Let's just focus on cups and Champions League. So I do think we're teetering on the brink, but that's another week away. Let's focus in the now. My real concern, as we talked about, we've touched on it really, is the mentality of yesterday. And we were talking about the press, and that press. We get told last season, we spent a lot of time as Arsenal fans, but also the commentators and the pundits tell us, Arsenal are the best pressing team in Europe. We got the best stats. We got none of that yesterday. Newcastle were superb with the way that they pressed us. They pressed us in the right zones. They pressed us in the right pockets, and then they sprung traps. There was a really good chance where I think Saka had the ball in the first half on the right wing. It broke down, and then Newcastle literally just zigzagged on that left-hand side. And then I think it was Isak had a shot, or Gordon, or somebody, I think it might have been Bruno even, actually. So they kind of went from back to front really, really quickly and impressively. The passing was on point for Newcastle, and they played well. My wife's family are all from the Northeast, and they're all Newcastle fans. And her uncle went to the Brighton game they played a couple of weeks ago, and they lost 1-0. And apparently he came back saying, I'm disappointed we lost, but we played brilliant. So Newcastle have been playing well for a while, I think. And we got the brunt of, they had a very good day. They were at their absolute peak. We were at our absolute nadir. We were terrible in all aspects of it. And passing as well. Did you notice that? The amount of times where a diagonal ball or a ball over the top, there was 2 or 3 times the ball goes over the top, and it goes over Saka's head and just off for a throw-in. Absolutely shocking. But what did you make of the little things that were just going wrong, like poor passing or lack of press? What do you put it down to? Do you think it is just a mentality thing? Do they, or as you said earlier, is it just a culmination of things? Bad day at the office. Hopefully we change that.
It's really hard to pinpoint exactly what it is. I do feel like there have been games earlier on this season as well where we've managed to scrape out results. I'm looking back to Leicester, Southampton, those sort of games where we've not played particularly well, and we've had spells in those games where we just haven't looked like we can spring 2 passes together. And that's why it kind of feels like a result like this has been in the post for a little while, because we know we've won games quite, not fortunately, we've ground out results. Against Leicester, that their keeper was just sublime, and we should have won that game a lot more comfortably than we did. Similar case against Southampton, we should have won that game a lot more comfortably. But there have been spells within those games where we just have struggled to put passes together, and we're just not doing the basics particularly well. Obviously, it doesn't help that you're missing your captain, you're missing Martin Odegaard. Calafiori's been out for a period of time, Timber's been out for a period of time. We've missed other players here, there, and everywhere. It's not been particularly easy for us in terms of fixtures at the start of this season. We played Newcastle away, we played Spurs away, we played City away, we played Villa away. Those are probably the toughest away games that you're going to get in the Premier League, and we've played them at the beginning of November, all of them. So I'm glad we got them out of the way in a sense, but it does obviously have an impact, especially when you've got injuries piling up as well. So I can't answer the question in the sense of what can I pinpoint it down to, but also I just think you're bringing in players like Zinchenko, for example, obviously played against Preston, came off the bench yesterday. I thought he had a good game against Preston, but like you, shared the reality that he was poor when he came on, and you can't really excuse him passing it directly to a Newcastle player. How does that happen as a professional footballer, like someone as experienced as him? So I don't know if it's mentality. I do think it's definitely fatigue to an extent, because some of these players are just being run into the ground at a minute with the amount of football they're playing. But also, Chris, it's the system. which fundamentally I think is why we lost this game yesterday. I said it at the start. Everyone else is saying it. It was passive. We did not need to play that way. We should have been braver. We should have took the game to Newcastle, and we should have been more technical about it. We've got players to do it as well. Jorginho can be that guy. He's barely had a look in this season. Jorginho and Rice were excellent at the back end of last season. You know, when we were blowing teams away, winning 4, 5, 6-0 on a regular basis at the start of the year, Jorginho was at the heart of that. He should definitely be playing more football. And then I'm even looking at the attack and thinking, could we take Martinelli out, who was just running down blind alleys yesterday, and bring in someone like Gabriel Jesus off the left? Like, can he do any worse than Gabriel Martinelli is at the moment? Not that Martinelli was dreadful, but I don't know if you felt it, Chris, but he was literally had the ball at his feet, head down, runs into Livramento. And he would do it time and time and time again whenever he got the ball, just running into blind alleys. And it was the same against Canate against Liverpool, like just out-muscled off the ball too easily. I really love Martinelli, but this season it just isn't happening for him, which is really frustrating. But yeah, in answer to the question, I do think it's a culmination of things. We need Ødegaard back. We need Calafiori back. We need these players to bring more balance to the side. But equally, Arteta should be looking at the players within the squad, the likes of Ilmanieri, the likes of Jorginho, the likes of Gabriel Jesus, the likes of even Raheem Sterling, who didn't get a look in yesterday, and thinking, okay, maybe some of these guys are out of form. They're coming in from the colds. But if it's going to make the team more balanced overall, I need to bring them in.
Yeah. Absolutely. So one of the things that PW's just said in the chat, so I'm going to bring up, but I was just thinking this exact same thing, PW, that Martinelli was isolated in Nice. I think that's what happened yesterday, and that's what teams are doing. Newcastle have done that for the last few seasons. In the 0-0 game at the Emirates about, was it 2 seasons ago, when we absolutely battered them, but they shut the game down. Fair play, whatever. That's history now. They doubled up. What they did was they doubled up on Saka, and they doubled up on, I don't know if it was Martinelli that day that played left wing. They did exactly the same thing this time around. And why would you not? Like, our biggest sort of creative threat is Bukayo Saka. And so why on earth would you leave him isolated against someone like Lewis Hall? So every time that Saka got the ball, there was one of the midfielders, whether it's Willock or whether it's Bruno or whether it's Joelinton, or sometimes 3 players, they doubled up. So they isolated Saka. Without Ben White, he wasn't being able to overlap. So there wasn't somebody taking the attention away from one of those players. So Saka was just sort of on his own left. On the other side, exactly the same thing. Timber wasn't overlapping on the left-hand side in the first half. So Gabriel Martinelli is just isolated. But you are right. It's then incumbent on him as our starting left winger to think to himself, okay, I'm not getting any joy, head down. So maybe I need to float a little bit. Maybe I need to receive the ball, play it in field, or come in field a little bit more and just rotate a bit more. Maybe I need to be talking to Havertz and saying, can we rotate a little bit? Let me drift a little bit. But that doesn't happen sometimes with Martinelli. He picks the ball up and he goes down the line. And Livramento is a quick player. He's a good player. He's a quick player. So you're not going to be able to smash him for pace. So I think it was a bit naive from Martinelli. It felt a little bit one-trick pony. It's a difficult one. It's a difficult one because, we need him to be stepping up in situations like this. But hey, can we talk a little bit around Leandro Trossard? Because I do think this is a elephant in the room that we need to address, because frankly, his performance yesterday, I think, means he should not be starting. He needs to be for the foreseeable future an impact sub. And my hope is that will happen as Martin Ødegaard comes back into the team, because it feels like a natural thing that you can do. Like you hook Trossard out, you put Ødegaard wide 8, you put Marino wide left 8. You play Partey or Rice in the centre as that holding. You can play, Martinelli on the left. I mean, maybe Trossard on the left, but I don't know. I think, to be honest, with his form, you'd probably just stick with Martinelli, Havertz through the middle, Saka on the right. I think Trossard needs to be sat down. What's your view of his performance yesterday? Because I thought there was some moments where he was shooting, where there was a better pass on. His distribution, his link play was just not there. I think he was just poor throughout, and I can't believe he lasted 70 minutes before being hooked.
Yeah, he holds onto the ball way too long for me. And when he does eventually do something with it, it's the wrong thing. Um, and I feel like this happens a lot with Trossard. Like he'll come off the bench, do really well. We'll bring him into the team. He might do well for a couple of games, and then he just kind of phases out quite quickly. So I totally agree. I think he needs to be sat down on the bench, given a bit of time out. And hopefully that will reignite things for him when we see his impact off the bench, which we know can be absolutely fantastic. So it's frustrating. I sympathise with him in a way because he's not playing in a role that is natural to him. But he's also not doing the basics well, and I think him and Havertz up top thing was great against Tottenham away, great against City away for the time that he was on the pitch, of course. But at this point, I feel like teams have sussed it out massively. It's a very old school way of playing, big man, little man up top, and I just think we need to change the whole system, bring him out, and go back to the sort of team that we recognise a lot more, the sort of team that played against Preston with the formation, the fluidity that we know we're quite used to. And also, I wouldn't be in a rush to keep Marino in the team at the minute. I know when we signed him, a lot of people were under the impression that it's going to be Rice as the 6, Marino as the 8, and Ødegaard as the right 8. And look, I think at the end of the season, I'd be surprised if that wasn't the midfield three that we see a lot of throughout the second half of the campaign. But right now, for the good of the team, I'd probably stick with Partey as the 6, Rice as the 8, and then when Ødegaard is back, bring him in as the right 8. That for me is probably our strongest midfield three. But then if you want to go a little bit more attacking against the sides that we should be beating at home, that's when you probably look to bring Marino in. I really like Marino. I think he was great against Liverpool, thought he was good against Preston. Anonymous yesterday, if I'm being totally frank, but as were a lot of the team. So I don't want to lay into him individually, but I have seen a lot of criticism for him online, which I can understand. There are times when he does feel a bit stiff. You look back to the Bournemouth game, again, looked quite stiff in that game. But again, I don't think we're playing in a system that suits him. I really don't think it works for him. So yeah, I think Arteta's got some big decisions to make in the next couple of weeks, especially with Ødegaard seemingly being on the periphery of coming back.
Yep, 100%. And you are right. Marino's a weird. He doesn't look fit to me, but even if he is fit, it just looks a bit sort of
Clunky.
Lumpy.
Yeah,
he's clunky and lumpy, and he's sort of bumbling around a bit. And yesterday, we thought we were getting a dual merchant, right? So you would have thought game like yesterday, Joe Linton, and if Tonali plays, and you've got Willock, you've got Longstaff, all physical sort of. They want to be in a bit of a battle, and we thought that's what we were getting. I didn't see him win a single duel yesterday. You can say that about the whole team, though. To be fair, the whole team just didn't win any of their duels whatsoever. So, to be honest with you, maybe this could be an isolated thing. But I saw it. I think it was the second half during the Shakhtar game. I was in the ground watching him, thinking, "You're just sort of waddling around a bit." He was just sort of jogging around. It's like, it doesn't look like a guy that's fully fit, but he's been back in training for over a month now. He's been away to Spain. He's getting games, but I'm just not sure in this early stage. It's early. Maybe you're right, but sorry, you are. I make you absolutely right. Yeah, Rice has got to play as that left 8. You've got to sit Marino down because it didn't really work. And if we're playing a duel winner and he's not winning duels, then what's the kind of point? So there we go. What's your kind of thoughts? Let's talk about half time, because at half time, I think I was messaging you guys on the chat, and I was messaging a few others, and I put something on social media to say maybe Arteta can make a sub. I was almost convinced. I thought there's no way he sat there and thought, yeah, I'll give the lads another 15 minutes. Were you surprised that he made absolutely no attempt to change it at half time? And in fact, it wasn't until 61 minutes, I think it was, when he took off Martinelli and Marino for Ben White and so it was Zinchenko and Nwaneri. Were you surprised that he waited until at least 2/3 of the game in before he made a change? Because it wasn't working at half time. So you would have thought that he'd just think, well, we've got to do something differently. This tactical setup doesn't work. That's where I think we've got to put some of the blame, and maybe Arteta he'll foot some of the bill for the blame for yesterday.
I'm not surprised, because I do feel like he's got some of that Arsene Wenger stubbornness about him. which is really frustrating. But he's like, look, I picked this team and I believe this team can win this game. So I think he wanted to give it at least 10, 15 minutes before making that call. He might have had a word with him at half time, tried to tweak it tactically, give players slightly different roles within the game compared to when they started the game. So I think he was quite adamant that side could go out there and turn it around. But we all knew it couldn't. And, that's what prevailed. And I do think we looked a little bit better when we brought Umanieri on. We looked a little bit more exciting, a bit more fluid. But it just still wasn't good enough, Chris. Like, it was still really, really disappointing. And yeah, it's something that Arteta does have to look at. If things aren't working, a football game is very short when you think about it, especially at half time. You've only got 45 minutes to really turn a game around, especially when you're up against a side like Newcastle, who, when they take a lead, they're very hard to claw it back from. So I do think when things aren't working, at the earliest given opportunity, make those changes. And I actually thought it was quite telling, and a lot of people have said this as well, that Raheem Sterling didn't get a sniff yesterday. Like, I thought he was okay against Preston. Like, I thought it was probably one of his better performances in an Arsenal shirt. But he's a guy that we brought in to kind of be a bit of an impact player in these sort of games, and we're just not even looking at him. And that kind of makes me wonder, why the hell did we bring him in if we're not going to use him in these situations?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of bits on that. I think the sub was with Jorginho coming on for Partey instead of Sterling. I think that was made because Partey was on a yellow, and he'd picked up and he'd caused a foul, and then he'd had a little word with the ref, and the ref was like, away you go, mate. And I think Arteta was like, no, I've got to just do a like for like here. So I think that's why he came on instead of Sterling. But maybe the question, to your point, is, well, can you not make a Sterling sub for somebody else a little bit earlier? Like, who would you bring Sterling on for? Would it be, because if you think on 61 minutes, he's taken off Martinelli, he's taken off Marino. Again, 70 minutes. Trossard lasting 71 minutes was frankly quite stunning, to be honest with you. He came off of Ben White. So you've got a midfield, which is Partey, Rice, and Nwaneri. And then you've got Trossard, Saka, and Havertz. Who would you have brought him on for? Would you have taken Partey off earlier and then put Sterling on and just say, screw it, let's do a Hail Mary, this isn't working?
It's a good question, actually. And you make a good point. We'd already taken off some of our key attackers and brought the likes of Jesus on. I think it would be a case of, instead of bringing on Jesus, you bring on someone like Raheem Sterling. And I'm not saying you should bring every single one of them on. But I just think in these moments, if he was someone that we looked at and identified as a player that could be a bit of a difference maker in these games, you would have brought him on that, around the 70-ish minute mark, so that he could try and make things happen. And it just didn't really feel like we were looking at him as an option at any given time. I do think out of the two of them, Gabriel Jesus and Sterling, Gabriel Jesus is the one that is in slightly better form in a minute, but that's not saying much because they're both pretty out of form.
Well, can I ask you on that? Can I just interject? Can we talk about Jesus? Because you want some sort of spark from him. Something's not right there, is there? Because this is a player who, what you do know you get from Gabriel Jesus is he will chase, he will hassle, he will harry, he will press, he will be a nuisance. I don't think I saw Gabriel Jesus be a nuisance yesterday. What was your kind of feeling on his performance?
Similar to Martinelli's, really, just running into trouble. Just, trying to get between two players. The amount of times you see Jesus run towards the corner flag, he's got two players in front of him, and then he tries to poke the ball between them. I feel like I've seen that move a million times over, and it never, ever works. That being said, I would start him against Inter Milan. I think that we need to change things up a little bit, and I would go the front three of Jesus, Havertz, and Bukayo Saka on the other side, just to give us something a little bit different. I'm sure we'll talk about Inter Milan in a bit more detail later on, but I just think we need to freshen things up a little bit. And he got his goal against Preston. We can all agree, much needed. Very good goal as well, by the way. And obviously, he came out after the game and said, "Look, I've not scored since January, but the reason for that is I've not been in the team." Actually, it's because he's missed a lot of chances when he has had them.
Yeah.
It's okay. I get it. He's been in and out of the side, but he's not clinical enough, and he has to own that and has to say, "Look, I'm not good enough in front of goal." Whether it's something that he can get better at, I don't believe he can at this stage in his career. I just sadly feel like missing Gilded's chances is is Gabriel Jesus's trademark, unfortunately. But we all know the other things he can do brilliantly: beating players, trickery in the box, causing mayhem, being a useful option on the flanks. He needs to be that guy again. And I just don't feel like he's close to being that at the moment. But Wednesday night is another opportunity for him to show Arteta what he can do. And yeah, I would start him on that left-hand side.
Yeah, we'll come to Wednesday in a little bit, but let's just wrap up the horror show that was yesterday. Barb's put something in the chat, which was so very poor, but the season is far from done. So I kind of laid my cards on the table earlier, but I don't know if I got your answer. If I did, and I just wasn't listening, apologies. But title?
I'm in the exact same camp as you. Like, I don't think we should be talking about the title right now. And I'm going to, in answer to your question, but I think we need to focus on getting a win and a good performance. Like, I was really encouraged by the past 2 games, to be honest. Like, I thought we played really well against Liverpool. I was really pleased with how exciting and fluid the game was against Preston. And I thought, right, the games against Shakhtar, which albeit we won, but not in great fashion. The game against Bournemouth, put them to one side. We've got over that little hump. Football's looking good again. Great, let's go. And then obviously yesterday happens and you're brought right back down to reality. But I don't want that to be the reality because I know we're capable of playing such good football. But it just feels like we've regressed a little bit in terms of playing style. Like the football we were playing in the 22-23 season was a significant level above what we're doing now in terms of excitement. It might have been a bit more susceptible to damage, but it was brilliant to watch. Like, it was so good. And we did that at times last season when we were smashing teams 4-5-6-0. We know we can play that way. We need to see that again. And until we do, I don't think we can talk about the title. I think someone tweeted me yesterday saying no team has come back from an 8-point deficit after 10 games played since there were like 42 games in a league season. I'm not sure how true that is, but it feels like 8 points is a lot easier to claw back these days than it was back then. And I think this will be a season where the likes of City, Liverpool will drop more points than they normally would. And Liverpool is 7 points ahead of us. And that doesn't sound good on paper, but they haven't been to Villa away. They haven't been to Newcastle away. They haven't been to Spurs away. They haven't been to City away. So they're going to drop points in those games. Like, it's almost a certainty they're not going to win all of those. So they will drop points at some point. City also have to go to some very tough games. The City are 5 points ahead of us. So basically, you need them to draw a game and us to beat them at home, and you're back on level points with them, which is certainly not beyond the realms of possibility. So it'd be stupid to say the title's done. I think in my hyperbolic reaction yesterday, I tweeted that the title's done, but in hindsight, given that City lost to Bournemouth, and I think they will lose more games this season, given that Liverpool, I think, will lose more games this season, we're definitely not out of it. But at the minute, I think it would be wrong to say that we're in it because we're not looking like a team that's capable of winning games. If we lose to Chelsea next week, I would struggle to see a way back because it could be a bit too much distance at that point, even in November. But as you know, Chris, we could, in the worst case, lose to Chelsea. It just takes a run of games to turn things around. You win 5 on the bounce and suddenly you're back in it. But you're relying on other teams to drop points. And I think that's a dangerous game to play. So cannot... I don't know about you. We have to beat Chelsea, don't we?
Yeah. It's a must win. We'd have beaten Newcastle today, and you just say it's a must not lose against Chelsea. In fact, even if we'd have drawn against Newcastle, you'd probably say it's probably, a must not lose next weekend. But that's been flipped into must win. A draw against Chelsea, I think, whatever happens, I think Man City and Liverpool are winning their next game unless they're playing each other. I know they're playing each other soon. My gut feel is that it's probably over. And you just saying that about no team has come back from 7-8 point margin, I can understand why, because it's so difficult. The margins are so fine, and we've lost players due to stupid red cards, out of which, frankly, most of them have been ludicrous. We've had lots of injuries, admittedly. So City, they've got a bigger squad. They've got £50 million right backs, left backs that they can just wheel out when they lose players. We don't have that.
Well, it's funny, Chris. Sorry to interject, but what you're saying about their next 2 games, Liverpool have Villa at home, which could be a tough game for them. Should be a tough game for them. City have got Brighton away, so I mean that's a very tough game. I mean, if we
And
beat Chelsea,
those games are before we play Chelsea, aren't they? So we will know.
yeah, and I mean, if they drop points, like forget about them losing. If they just drop points in those games and we beat Chelsea, the mood will feel very, very different.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, let's move on to let's look forward for the last sort of 5-10 minutes or so. Inter on Wednesday. What's your gut feel? Who's going to play?
My gut feeling is it'll be
Gabriel Jesus, so that's one.
Yeah, I think it'll be a really tough game. Really, really tough game. Sort of game where would you be happy with a point? Probably. I think it's that difficult of a game. But I do think again, Inter Milan are a side that we can beat, and we need to show what we're made of in this game. We need to be brave, and I think Arteta has to choose a brave lineup. I don't think he will go with this team. I wouldn't be surprised if he played something very similar to what we saw yesterday, and I will be very disheartened if I do see that type of formation again. I'll be I'll be upset, to be honest, if I see that as a starting 11. Because it's not a team that I feel we should be playing, especially when you've got Chelsea on the horizon as well. We need to try something different going into that game. So my team would be David Raya in goal. I think I would actually do what you're saying, Chris, and bring Kivior in at left back, having thought about it. I want a bit more defensive solidity. And I know he's not going to overlap. He's not the best passer of the ball, but I think Kivior has been good. Good against Liverpool, great against Preston. I would play him in this game at left back. Back to, obviously, Gabriel and Saliba. Right back, I would probably go with Ben White, given that Timber is just coming back from that injury. And Ben White, we know, is great on the overlap as well. So I would go with him. Midfield.
You're absolutely spot on. And the reason I'm interrupting is because basically, rather than repeat, I'd do exactly the same thing. And I'll let you name the rest of the team. But what I would do is I would flip the minutes. I'd share the minutes, timeshare between White and Timber. So White gets 60 minutes, Timber gets 30 minutes, or 45 if need be, whatever it be, because I think we need both of those guys fit for Chelsea, and Timber on the left and White on the right. Go on, carry on.
And Timber started 3 games in a row. I mean, he played that game against Preston, so definitely I think that's the right way to go to keep them both fresh. Midfield, I would go with Partey, Rice and Nwaneri. I'd be very surprised if he starts Nwaneri, but like I say, I think if you're playing that defence, you've got Partey and Rice in the team as well, you've got enough protection there. It won't be on Nwaneri unless he literally passes the ball to an Inter Milan player or puts the ball in the back of the net himself, that it will be directly his fault. So I think you can play him, and there's enough protection in there to let him do what he does best. And if it's not working, change it. You've got players like Mikel Marino on the bench.
Maybe change it for Mikel Arteta. Martin Odegaard. Maybe change it for Martin Odegaard.
I didn't realise things had got that bad, Chris, that we were having to bring Mikel Arteta in. And then my front three would be Gabriel Jesus on the left, Havertz up top, and Bukayo Saka.
Yeah. And I kept interrupting you there, but basically I think you and I are in broad alignment, so there's no point in me saying anything else. If he does play that team, and maybe even Martin Odegaard can get 20 minutes. Prediction? Just because Amanda will be watching this and writing it down in a book.
If he plays that team, I think it would be a score draw. Inter Milan is a really tough place to go. They've got good players. I reckon a 1-1. But look, if we play really, really well and we draw 1-1, I'll be fine with that. I'll be absolutely fine with that. Obviously, it'd be frustrating if we take the lead and then we concede. But if we get a draw, the performance is good. I'll feel much better going into Chelsea. What I want is 2-0 win, clean sheet, brilliant performance, lots of shots on goal, lots of chances created. Will I get that? I'm not sure. But look, if he plays a team with good balance, exactly as PW says in the chat, balance, players playing in their right positions, no reason why we can't win this game.
Nice. I think it might be. I think it might be a ball 0-0 draw. And to be honest with you, if it's the skankiest, scabbiest ball 0-0 draw, I'd probably take that. Just take the draw. Tough game away against the Italian champions. Whatever. Move on.
I think the performance needs to be good, Chris. I don't want to interrupt you there, but I really think if we, if it's a rubbish game and we don't play well, if it's like Shakhtar and we just about get it over the line, even for a draw, that's not going to be good enough going into Chelsea. The performance has to be good. I really do believe that.
That's a good shout. That is a good shout. So I'm not going to disagree with that too much. But I think it will end up being bore 0-0, to be honest with you. That's just how my gut feel is at the moment. And then we've got Chelsea at the weekend. So do you want to do a prediction? Let's not go through the whole team stuff again, but do you want to do a prediction on the Chelsea game?
I mean, Chelsea away. There's an
They're
argument.
playing well as well.
Yeah, there's an argument to be said that they're playing better football than us at the minute.
Yeah.
And I'd struggle to disagree with that. If you're asking me right now, I think we're losing it. I really hate to say that. I don't want to say it too loudly, but I can just see Cole Palmer in that midfield, looking at what he did against Newcastle last week, spinning them about. You know, I think if we play anything like we did yesterday, we'll get torn apart. I don't think we'll lose it, you know, embarrassingly, but I think Chelsea would be the better side. But I'm pinning hopes on Arteta changing it, having a good performance on Wednesday, and then we go to the bridge and we look at a completely different team. I'm going to go 1-0 Arsenal for that game, just because I feel like I have to.
Well, I'm going to say 1-0, or actually I'm going to say 1-0 Chelsea, because I do think, and I think that'll be the nail in the title coffin. It doesn't give me, just for those you guys listening and posting things in the chat, it doesn't give me any pleasure to say this, by the way. I've just got to say how I feel at the moment. I don't know, maybe, as you said, James, an amazing performance against Inter Milan. We go to the Italian champions, we beat them 1 or 2-0, and we play brilliantly, and Gabriel Jesus scores, and we look amazing, you know, and suddenly you're thinking, okay, the tails are up now, so maybe there's an opportunity. But it just, off the back of yesterday's performance, off the back of some of the performance, Liverpool aside, in the recent weeks, it just doesn't feel like the sort of game where we're going to blow Inter Milan away and then blow Chelsea away. So really, really tough time at the moment. Really, really difficult. Let's wrap up with just a couple of questions before we say goodbye. Gental 1969 says, do we need another trip to Dubai? Quite
clearly. Yeah, that would come in perfectly right about now.
Yeah, exactly. And then one final question from Avon is, have sides worked out our non-Odegaard formation? That's an interesting one to get into.
Yeah, and I think we touched on it earlier in the show. Yesterday, we played into Newcastle's hands. Absolutely. The formation, I thought, was a masterstroke when we first saw it in the game against Spurs away. And we were kind of forced into playing that way because we weren't only missing Odegaard, we were also missing Declan Rice. And that's why we reverted to this 4-4-2 formation with Jorginho and Partey. And it was solid as a rock in that game. Really, really good. Barely gave Spurs a sniff. We then did it again against Man City when Declan Rice was brought back into the sides, and it worked well. But then there are times when, you know, we've been a bit braver against the likes of, I know I was saying we weren't perfect in these games against Leicester and Southampton earlier on, but just look at the chances we created in those games. I don't know why against Newcastle away we reverted to the system we were playing against the likes of Spurs and City, where we just said, you're going to be the better team or the more superior team. The impetus is on you to break us down. And we just went into our shell. We shouldn't be doing that. We're a team stacked with talented players. We play some scintillating football when we can do. I think it's been sussed out, but I also think we're playing into opposition's hands by playing it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And I think the other worrying thing, just to build on that, because I can't really build too much on it, but it's a slightly concerning state of affairs when you're missing one. All right, here's our captain, here's one of our best players and our main creative outlet. And this is why the calls from Nwaneri playing more often is coming so loudly from Arsenal fans, because you can't have just one player goes out and your whole creative system just breaks down. And there's individual game states and individual matches with opponents where some things work and we stumbled upon that. But you can't then just suddenly say, well, we've just got to do this until Odegaard comes fit. It's not the right way to win titles. And I think it's something Arteta need to look at. Right, I think that's it for us today. I think we need to just park that and maybe go on and try and enjoy the rest of our Sundays. Who knows? Maybe there can be a 0-0 draw between Spurs and Villa with 5 sendings off each, and then we'll do the same again for Chelsea against Man United later. I'll be watching that Chelsea. I probably wasn't going to watch the Chelsea Man United game, but given that they're our opponents next weekend, I think it might be something that I'm a little bit more interested in. James, do you want to wrap us up and then say goodbye to the wonderful folks?
Yeah. I mean, thank you all for tuning in. As always, being part of the Same Old Arsenal podcast. Great having you along for the ride, even though it wasn't the most enjoyable of circumstances. But look, all is not lost. But we need to start playing better football. I think we can all agree on that one. And we can only do that by turning things around on Wednesday night. So touch wood, Arteta sees sense. And we see a more exciting team lineup. And, you know, if we see Il Manieri starting, I think a lot of us will be feeling a lot more excited. And I think the saving grace is Arteta is starting to trust him more. I don't think he'd have brought him on with that much time left a couple of weeks ago in the game against Newcastle. Started him against Preston, obviously. But he is starting to bed him in more and more and more and more. So I think this is the time. Play him against Inter Milan. Why not? It is a bit of a daunting one. But for me, he does not look fazed by any of that. So let's bring him in. And yeah, thank you all for tuning in, as always, as I say. And from myself and Chris, see you next time. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.